Frost Death Knight is one of the most fun and satisfying classes to play ever in World of Warcraft Classic history. It kind of feels like you are a fully world buffed Fury Warrior back in original vanilla Classic. Not only that, but it is incredibly satisfying to level with, so let's go into a guide on how to play Frost DK and everything you need to know. Now, some of the reasons to play Frost are that Frost has incredibly high single target sustain damage with awesome AoE bursts or just general bursts whenever you get any procs, which is really nice for leveling as well as dungeons, and then you're actually still pumping on those single target situations. Unholy, on the other hand, is a little bit slower of a playstyle with a little bit more nuance, but this actually has a lot more powerful, long sustained AoE damage and a little bit less generally single target DPS. As a quick reference, this is my damage in a dungeon with a couple people that have full Sunwell gear, and you can see this is me as a Frost DK right here, which 1600 isn't ridiculous DPS, but in all honesty, I have terrible gear as a boosted character. And then as Unholy, just as a reference, I was doing about 150 DPS less. So today we're going to go over things like talents and glyphs, runes and runic power, stats and gearing, your rotation, which actual Runeforging enchants you're going to want to use, which presences you're going to want to use and when, and also some useful macros at the end. The first thing you need to know about Frost DK is that as a dual wield spec, you're always going to be using two one-handed weapons. Using a two-hander in Frost is massively gimping your DPS, and your main abilities will hit with both of those actual weapons. It is also highly proc based and very quick, so everything is going to happen very fast. For DKs in general, if you haven't played DKs yet, you need to know that there is two resources, runes and runic power. You have 6 runes total, 2 blood runes, 2 frost runes, and 2 unholy runes. And runic power kind of works like rage, where you stack it up and then spend it on abilities. Most of the time, that ability is going to be frost strike. Every ability you use costs runes, like icy touch costing 1 frost rune, putting one of those runes on a 10-second CD. I'm not going to go into recharge time and min-maxing that right now in this video, but just know that right now you are getting runes on CD whenever you use them. Also for Frost, if you're using an ability that costs a blood rune, it'll then become a death rune, which basically can be used as any ability. So you can see that if I'm using blood strike, now my runes are both death runes, which means they can be both frost, unholy, or even blood, but you can use them now for obliterate as your main ability, and then they will go back to blood runes. If you are leveling in the open world, I would highly suggest grabbing the Rested XP guide. This is phenomenally helpful, and I know a lot of content creators are kind of shilling it. One, we do actually get a kickback from it, but realistically, it is so useful and so well done that I absolutely love these guides. Also, it will have a pre-quest guide in it that will instantly get you to 71 and almost to 72. It legitimately just comes with it if you purchase the guide itself. You definitely don't need a guide while leveling. You could probably just use Questy, and Blizzard is kind of working again on their actual internal questing system, but it's really helpful, and it'll just give you an arrow of exactly where to go to do all quests and tell you which order to do them, making it just a really easy experience leveling up all of your characters. If you want that guide, there's of course a link in the description for my discount. And of course, one more time, it does actually help out the channel. Now there's 2 main specs for Frost. The first one is going to be your early game and one I prefer while leveling. And the second one is going to be your late game build. Now this early game build is a Frost Blood spec, while the other one will be a Frost Unholy spec. So the spec in the background is the one I would suggest for leveling. And the spec you're now looking at here, the Frost Unholy spec, is the spec I would suggest for late game actually. So you're going to actually lose things like Chill of the Grave and a couple other talents, especially all of the blood talents, where you move into actually Unholy. As for glyphs, you're going to always use Glyph of Obliterate, Glyph of Frost Strike, and Glyph of Disease as your main glyphs. Now, these are very important. Glyph of Obliterate makes your Obliterate do 25% more damage. This is your highest damage dealing ability. And then Disease is probably my favorite glyph in the game for Death Knights. This allows us to refresh our diseases with just a blood rune using pestilence instead of using both an unholy and a frost rune to keep our diseases up on the target. This is going to be huge on longer fights. Also, for minor glyphs, you're almost always going to be running these as any sort of DPS Death Knight. You're going to have Raised Dead, Glyph of Horn of Winter, and Glyph of Pestilence. And this is actually my next favorite glyph. It increases the range of your pestilence by a 5-yard radius. This is humongous and you will notice it immediately. Now for stats and gearing. Frost is first of all going to want to have 2 one-handed weapons, both of them being slow because you want to hit really hard with your main abilities, which actually hit the target with both weapons. Then you're going to need hit rating. You'll need at least 8% for special abilities. You need at least 5 from your gear because you get 3 more from the talent Nerves of Cold Steel. But you're also going to want to get more and more hit. It's very important stat and probably your most important stat if you're any sort of dual wielding class. Now spell hit cap is 17%, but the next really important thing also is going to be expertise. 26 expertise makes it so that your abilities can't be dodged. Then your most important primary stat is going to be strength. You do get 2 attack power per strength, and then later on you're going to want to start focusing on armor pen, and then we have haste and crit, which are about the same. Haste does reduce the GCD, but a lot of times you still do have to worry about waiting on your runes, but it helps you when you get a proc to use extra Howling Blasts. The 3 procs you're going to want to focus on as a Frost DK are going to be Icy Talons, which gives you an extra 20% melee haste. Also, improved Icy Talons will actually give your entire party extra haste. And then Killing Machine procs, which is actually from melee attacks that have a chance to proc it, allowing your next Icy Touch, Howling Blast, or Frost Strike to always be a crit. This is insanely important for AoE situations. You want to hit those Howling Blasts with Killing Machine procs, and then Rime procs. Rime is not working correctly on the beta, so we're actually having a lot less DPS overall as a Frost DK, but what this will do on Obliterates is actually reset your cooldown for Howling Blast and make your next Howling Blast actually cost no runes. In an ideal opener, you're gonna do Icy Touch into Plague Strike, then you're gonna Blood Tap to get Unbreakable Armor up, and then you're gonna hit your Obliterates. Until you are done with those, then you're gonna use Frost Strike and then Empower Rune Weapon. And then if you are in an AoE situation, instead of using Unbreakable Armor after that Blood Tap, you'll actually use Pestilence after that Blood Tap, and then you'll go into your Howling Blasts and Obliterates. Do note that Blood Boil and Death and Decay are almost never worth using. Some of the general rules of Frost are that you're always prioring rune usage over runic power. You always want to get your runes on CD over runic power. You're always using Unbreakable Armor when it's consuming a death rune in combination with Blood Tap, and you're always synchronizing your blood runes. That means using Pestilence and Blood Strike together to get them back into being death runes whenever they are up, and this also means that that Pestilence will be refreshing your actual dots on the boss or target. Now, as for your AoE rotation, this is actually highly situational, and this is where I think all of the fun from this class really comes in, because you're always changing up what you're doing. But if you're at 3+ targets, the general rule is to prioritize Howling Blast, especially with Killing Machine over Obliterate. You also want to make sure you have your dots up always. Now, those Obliterates will also start proccing Rime and giving you more Howling Blasts, but realistically, Frost Death Knight has one of the weaker sustain AoEs, but a really powerful burst AoE. So it's really strong in dungeon situations and leveling situations. So sometimes you're going to actually have to sit there and wait on using Frost Strike so that it doesn't take over that Killing Machine proc, and just wait for Howling Blast to get off CD and use that, because you have a lot more value from that than using Killing Machine with Frost Strike instead of on Howling Blast in any sort of AoE situation. Now for your rune forges, you're going to use Rune of the Fallen Crusader on one of your weapons, and the other weapon is going to be Rune of Razor Ice. So those are the 2 runes you're going to be running. As for presences, this is actually really fun. Blood Presence is going to be our favorite single target DPS presence. This will actually increase your damage by the most, and it will also reduce your downtime of your runes or anything like that. Now, most of the time, leveling up and also in dungeons or speedruns or anything like that, you're actually going to be running Unholy Presence. Not only does it increase your movement speed, but it actually reduces your GCD by 0.5 seconds. This means you can get up all of your dots on a lot of targets way faster. This also means you can use abilities a lot quicker, and it means that when things are dying fast, you are still actually outputting as much damage as possible. This also just purely feels a lot better on the class. You are getting a lot more abilities out way faster. But if you're doing single target situations like a single target rotation, a boss or something like that, you're gonna have quite a bit of downtime if you're using Unholy Presence. Blood Presence will make that a lot less, and it is a lot smoother on single target situations. Frost Presence is basically only used when you need to tank or survive something. Now for useful macros, you're pretty much just gonna set yourself up with a lot of mouse over macros. There's quite a few abilities that are extremely useful to have mouse over macros, but also you're gonna wanna make sure you have start attack macros on almost all of your abilities. This is very important because sometimes you'll be changing targets while you don't have runic power or runes and you want to instantly start meleeing. Also, you do want to macro in Rune Strike into a lot of your abilities while leveling. Rune Strike is the highest DPS output per runic power. It doesn't hurt to have it macroed into most of your abilities, and it's incredibly powerful. And from there, I think that's everything you need to know to get in and play Frost DK. You can min-max knowing all of this information very well. Just get in there and practice it, because realistically, it's gonna feel very natural until you're in AoE situations at first, and then it's gonna feel really good later on as you practice a little bit more. This is an insanely fun spec to play, and you're gonna love it during dungeons. It's also gonna be incredibly powerful leveling up, especially if you have actual gear. Now, once again, if you wanna see me cover any of your favorite classes next, especially melee classes or some of the tanks, prop pallies coming soon, just let me know in the comments. And if you don't want to miss any of those, just like and subscribe.